of the reasons is because Ellen can't get rid of me, but it's also because I've been doing the political advocacy thing in Austin for a long time. As far as I know, FixAustin.org was only the second no-kill advocacy group in the country, formed in 2005. There was one in Indianapolis called Move to Act, but that's it. We were the first one, and we intentionally, from day one, tried to create a model that could be replicated in other cities, down to the name. The reason we picked the name FixAustin is so that people could fix whatever it is for their community. So there's, for example, a Fix San Francisco, and there's a Fix Charlotte, and some other people have chosen no kill and then the city's name. Dangerously, just so you know, the ASPCA is now hoarding domain names with those names in them so that no one can use them. So if you're thinking about creating a political advocacy group, grab a name fast, grab a domain name fast, because otherwise the ASPCA may grab they grab like 80 names or something like that already so that people can use them. But back to the story, in 2005 we started, and so I've been doing this a long time. We made a lot of mistakes, a huge number of mistakes, and so the purpose of this is so that you don't repeat our failures. So you can replicate our successes, but not our failures. We have had some successes that are pretty substantial that we can talk about. Hopefully we're not always this platoon. The City Council mandated in 2010, in March 2010, the Austin City Council unanimously mandated that the city shelter implement the programs and policies of the no-kill equation. They unanimously mandated that the shelter achieve a 90% save rate. They unanimously mandated that the shelter end convenience killing, which is the killing of animals for space when space is available for them. The vast majority of shelters across the country kill animals, quote unquote, for space while they leave cages empty. And we actually that was a huge fight here. Again, the ASPCA was against us. Most of the local groups were against us because we were saying, let's not kill animals for space when we have a cage space for them. That was really revolutionary and controversial, but the City Council mandated it, and they actually give that mandate credit for saving thousands and thousands of lives alone, because our shelter has a capacity, well, the old shelter had a capacity of about 700 cages, and about 150 of them were empty at any given time. And we're talking about saving the healthy animals were being killed at that time for space. So we have had some serious successes on the political level. We also, one of the things that we demanded was a new shelter director, and it took us many years, but in 2010, the city decided to change leaders, and we have a shelter director with proven no-kill experience, and that has been an amazing, immense difference for the animals that come into our shelter. We're saving far more animals now than we did before at the shelter, and the service and the goal and the customs of the shelter have changed dramatically in that period. So 2005 is when we started. There was no foster program it was Town Lake Animal Center was what our shelter was called at the time. It's now called Austin Animal Center because it's a homegrown Town Lake. But in 2005, the shelter had no foster program, 0 animals and fosters. The shelter had no off-site adoptions. The shelter, in our view, did not have a compassionate director that wanted no-kill. The city's official save rate goal in 2005 was 50%. These are official goals. This is in their budget. That is what the city's goal was to do, and unsurprisingly, that's what they did. I mean, you meet your goals. The city believed that that was the goal of the shelter, and that was the goal that the city met. And in 2005, the number of animals killed was 14,304, which we talked about earlier as 34 animals a day, including weekends and holidays. So basically, there were people whose job it was to kill all day. And that's, again, true in a lot of shelters. 2011, at the end of 2011, the shelter has a foster program with hundreds of animals and fosters. Although they don't currently operate off-site adoptions, those have been mandated by council and have taken the form of Austin Pets Alive, operating out of Town Lake Animal Center after the shelter moved. We have a compassionate shelter director who's dedicated to no-kill. The city's official goal and mandate for the Town Lake Animal Center, or for the Austin Animal Center now, is a 90% save rate. And this number is one of the numbers that I changed. This number was less than 2,000 in 2011. So we went from killing 14,000 a year in 2007 to killing less than 2,000 this year, which is a pretty phenomenal change. I've also been featured on the cover of local newspapers. We think that's me, underneath the wolf head. This said, Austin animal advocates are at each other's throats. So, we talked about earlier this morning how even today, this many years later, we're still despised. Well, one of the local papers still despises us this many years later. And every time the Chronicle, which is our liberal mag, every time the Chronicle covers no-kill, it's negative. Every single time. And again, we'll talk about mistakes, and I actually think this was my fault, and we'll talk about that. So the lesson here was if a handful of people in Austin, Texas can change everything for the animals in our community, so can you for yours. But you have to get started, and you will hear this over and over and over again in the next 3 days. You have to start today. You don't wait a month to start. You don't wait 6 months to start. You don't wait a year to start. You start now. Now is when you can start saving lives and manage the animals that are coming to your shelter. So this is the outline of my speech here. First, we're going to talk about arming yourself, getting yourself ready for battle. 2, building a no-kill campaign, how to do that. 3, understanding and overcoming predictable and recurring challenges. 4, knowing when you're winning, which is a really exciting and fun moment that you will all get to. And 5, parting advice. Understanding the movement. Again, we talked a little bit about this earlier, but it's really important to kind of build your foundation before you start advocating for animals, to truly understand where this movement is coming from, what happened in it, understanding the successes of the movement, understanding why and how to replicate those successes. So I recommend that you read Redemption or Reconcilable Differences or both, and I know that there's a new one coming out as well, and it really helps to understand where this movement came from and why it's defined the way it is and why it's opposed the way it is. Get to know the no-kill equation, which I believe is one of my next slides. And the no-kill equation is a set of programs and policies that have been replicated to save lives over and over and over again. There are now 30 communities in the country with 90% or higher save rates, and by and large they got there the same way. So there's no purpose in trying to reinvent the wheel. There's no purpose in trying to come up with your new programs and policies. All you need to do is replicate success rather than failure. Familiarize yourself with the successes. Again, it's hysterical to me. I mean, it's amazing at the same time. But when I made this slide, those were the key successes. When I made this slide, it was before Austin had reached no-kill. And the successes were Charlottesville, Reno, and Ithaca, New York. And now this slide can have 30 different cities on it. I mean, it is just astonishing how different things are in the last couple of years. And understanding where we've been and where we're going. See, the jack of all trades doesn't completely fix it. But I know what's on the bottom of that slide. The traditional strategy in animal welfare, which is still the strategy in the vast majority of communities, is called LES, legislation, education, and sterilization. Or another way to say conventional wisdom. This is what, if you walk up to somebody on the street who has no idea what they're talking about, or somebody who's been involved in rescue for the last 30 years, they will tell you this is the key to saving lives. More legislation, more mandatory laws, more licensing, more mandatory spay-neuter. All of those mandatory laws is the answer. Force people to be more responsible with their animals. Education, we need to go into schools. We need humane educators. We need an auditorium for humane education. That's what they'll tell you is that we need to do. And sterilization in the form of either forced or voluntary sterilization of animals. That's been the strategy, with the exception of sterilization, since about 1890. And it's never worked anywhere. And it doesn't work. And it's not going to work. And it's insane to believe that if we follow the strategy that we've always been following, that we'll receive results that are any different than what we already have. And so where we're going is the no-kill equation. And that is the set of programs and policies that have worked to save lives in every community. And here they are. The no-kill equation is, and a lot of these will be covered in the various speeches over the next 3 days. Feral cat TNR program. This is getting animals that are out in the community, trap, neuter, and release them to prevent those litters from happening in the future. High volume, low cost spay neuter. Making spay neuter accessible to as many people as possible. One of the conventional wisdoms is that no one's out there spaying and neutering their animals. But the problem is irresponsible people who aren't spaying and neutering their animals. As it turns out, 90% of people who have family incomes of $35,000 or higher have already altered their animals. That is a shocking statistic that it goes against conventional wisdom. 90% of people who can afford to spay and neuter their animals have already done so. Within that 10%, 50% of people who have family incomes of less than $35,000 or more have already spayed and neutered their animals. 50% of the people who cannot afford to spay and neuter their animals on their own have already done so. That last category is the people that we aren't reaching yet. But this goes to show that this forced sterilization, I feel like some people can't even say the word spay and neuter without capitalizing them. It's not the end all be all. It's not everything. It is part of getting to no-kill, but it's not the only ingredient to getting to no-kill. And making spay and neuter very accessible for that last category of people which cannot afford to do it on its own and are not currently being reached by low-cost and spay and neuter are the ones that we need to target. Rescue groups, giving rescue groups the authority and the ability and empower them to save as many lives as they can. There are shelters all over the country who won't work with rescue groups, who would rather kill an animal than give it to a rescue group. You know, we're fighting shelter rescue access laws all over the country to try to make it a right for rescue groups who are qualified rescue groups to have access to save animals at shelters. You know, again, Cheryl's here. She would give she begs qualified rescue groups to take animals. But there are shelter directors across the country who are the opposite. They won't even work with them. They'll shut the doors and not let anybody. I mean, pit bulls are especially a problem. There are shelters like very big, wealthy, famous shelters like Houston Humane Society and Houston SPCA who won't even let rescue groups take pit bulls. I mean, it's astonishing how much resistance there is to rescue groups in some shelter communities. Foster care. And that's the topic of another conversation today, but getting as many animals within your foster program as possible to save as many as you can. This is especially important because, for example, kitten intake is seasonal. So you want to get as many kittens into your program as possible when kitten intake is high. And then when kitten intake is low but demand is still high, then you'll have them. Amazingly, one of the things that we discovered in Austin is we just drew the line in the sand. Austin Pet Select did and said, we're going to take every bottle baby, period. There's not going to be a bottle baby that dies at an Austin Animal Shelter. So they took every single one. When December came, Austin Pet Select still had kittens when no one else did. None of the other rescue groups did, none of the other shelters did, because we had saved them. We had saved all of them, and many of you probably know this, but December is one of the highest adoption months of the year. So while most shelters are killing all of their animals in the summertime and don't have any to meet the demand in the wintertime, we were meeting that demand and saving lives by having a foster program. Comprehensive adoption programs, including off-site adoptions, which are a key integral to getting to no-kill, which is also covered here. Pet retention, getting people to solve the problems that they have with their pets rather than dropping them off. It could be as simple as if someone found a pet, helping them scan it for a microchip and finding the owner rather than impounding it. I mean, again, I have to give Austin Animal Center a lot of credit. My girlfriend and I recently found a big dog in the neighborhood. We called them to report it so that they would put it on their page as a found animal. Of course, we had no intention of bringing it in, but we're not normal people. Most people would think that the animal shelter is the first place that you should bring a lost animal. And the shelter said, we'd love to help you take a photo of it and put it on our website. We would love to help you scan it and find the owners, but would you please hold on to it during that process so that we don't have to make space for it at the shelter. And this animal was saved because they did find the owner, and an animal was saved at the shelter because they didn't have to make space for it because the shelter's full. And that's just completely the opposite of what traditional sheltering has been, which is just bring it in and we'll make room. Medical and behavioral rehabilitation, this goes for animals that are already in your community that people want to bring in, but it also goes to animals that are at the shelter. Public relations and community involvement, again, that we talked about here, but getting the community and the public involved as much as you possibly can. Volunteers and proactive redemptions. And what this means is returning as many animals to their homes as possible. This is a huge opportunity in animal welfare, and one that is largely ignored in most shelters. And that is that the vast majority of dogs that come into a shelter are owned animals. There is almost no such thing as a stray dog. And in my opinion, there shouldn't be a stray dog run in any animal shelter. It should be the lost dog run. Because dogs, by and large, do not live in the wild. Of course there are exceptions. Of course there's the dog that got out 4 years ago and has been living in a wooded area. But that is the exception. The vast majority of dogs coming into an animal shelter are owned animals. And if we rethink the way that we approach that, and instead of feeling like we have to adopt them all out, and we have to spay and neuter them all, and everything that we do, if we can find a way to return it to its home, we've just saved another life. Both that one and the one who we would have to kill to take its place. Reno, Nevada has the best proactive redemption program in the country. They now return 65% of the dogs that come into the shelter to their owners. Imagine how less your shelter's resources are strained if they can return that many. And they actually will do it in the field. If they find an animal on the street, they don't bring it back to the shelter. In fact, there's a long checklist that the officer has to check to complete before the shelter will even bring it back. And they have to knock on doors, and they have to post flyers, and they have to ask people in the neighborhood where the dog came from. But because of that, they return the vast majority of the dogs that are lost. Get to know your animal welfare, your community's animal welfare landscape. And we talked about this a little bit earlier. But you have to identify the key stakeholders and the people in your community who are already involved in animal welfare. You need to evaluate your shelter, get that data that Ellen talked about. Figure out whether your shelter is following the no-kill equation. Do they have a foster program? Do they have offsite adoption programs? How's their customer service? When someone walks into the shelter, are they welcomed? Are they harassed? I walked into a shelter that I was trying to help in Baton Rouge a couple of years ago, and we walked in, I'm serious, I'm in a suit with 2 other people in suits, and we walked into the shelter at 11 a.m. on a Saturday morning, and one of the shelter staff screams at us, "Get behind the window!" Because they were worried we were going to mug them or something. I mean, it was horrible. The experience was horrible. Basically, their viewpoint was if someone was coming into the shelter, it was a problem. That person was trying to harm them somehow. And you got to completely flip that on its head and treat the public as your savior and the public as your customer, and have the most excellent customer service that you can possibly have. And again, we don't always do it right. We don't always do it right in Austin. I'm sure Cheryl will tell you that her shelter doesn't always do it right. We always make mistakes. Everyone makes mistakes. But if your goal is the best customer service possible and you're constantly forcing that down, then you're going to save more lives. What's the current budget of your shelter? What's its current intake? What are its outcomes? Again, these are the things that actually you can use to measure success. It's not just about inputs, it's about outcomes. And what kind of shelter director do you have? Meet with them. Find out whether they're open to saving more lives or whether they're closed to it. From a philosophical perspective, too, though, you need to reject excuses and pick sides. You need to understand that this is a battle. It absolutely is a battle in most communities. It's not something that's just going to happen without you. It's not something that everybody's just going to all of a sudden agree to. Ellen gave the speech about going to meet with stakeholders in 2008. Well, I had already gone to meet with all the stakeholders in 2005. And I said, I want to make Austin a no-kill community. I want you to be the group that does it, and I want to help you do it, and I want to join your board of directors. And every single one of them said no, we're not interested. That's not our goal. Every single organization in Austin did not have, animal welfare organization in 2005 did not have the goal of being no-kill. And so you need to understand that process, and you need to commit to it. And commit to and engage in the democratic process. We're going to talk about that a little bit later. But the way that you empower a community and that you can affect real change in a community is you actually have to commit to the process that gets there. I think that's a mistake that animal welfare people make all the time, is they think they can go to one committee meeting and yell and scream and say save the babies and that it's over. And it's just not how it works. You need to be like the people who actually affect change. What do they look like? Well, they look like people, they look like men in suits. You know, those are the ones that are actually getting stuff done in the legislatures and in Congress and the city councils. You have to behave like the people who actually get stuff done. That's how you get stuff done. And you need to reject your own excuses that will delay. I cannot tell you how frustrating it is when people will email me and they'll say, how do we do this in our community? And I'll start talking to them. And they say things, well, I swear, one of my good friends in another community said, I just wish somebody in our community would step up and do this. Why are you talking to me then if you wish someone else will do it? Because you're the one that's going to have to do it. You know, I'm supposed to give a speech to a group of humane associations in Virginia, and I'm actually kind of terrified that I'm going to be talking to humane societies, and I'm sure they're terrified that I'm going to talk to them. But really think there are three options for people. Either you're going to commit to it, and you're going to lead it. You're going to lead the effort in your community. You're going to commit to opposing the effort in your community, or you're going to be the person that stands by the sidelines and does nothing. And if you're the person who commits to opposing it or stands by and does nothing, then animals are going to die because of the positions that you're taking. But if you're the person that commits to engage in the process and commits to saving lives today and starts today, then you're going to be on the right side of history. Eventually your community is going to flip. I mean, it's inevitable at this point. But how many lives die in the meantime is really up to you. So the lessons are change starts with you and get ready to fight, because unfortunately it very likely will be a fight. Alright, so now I'm going to talk about building a no-kill campaign. You want to identify your goals, identify your audience, craft your message, and implement key strategies and tools. And we're going to walk through each of these. So the goals are actually pretty simple. The first time I gave this speech several years ago at the NOCO conference in DC, I kind of pretend like we weren't really sure what the goals are, and then as I've become more confident at this speech, I'm just going to tell you what the goals are. So you'll just have to look at that. The goal is become a no-kill community, and we set the bar, the minimum of a no-kill community at right around 90%. And the reason we do that is because the real definition of no-kill is saving every treatable and adoptable savable animal. But if you allow people to use those categories, then they can categorize away everything. And they can say, well, bottle babies aren't savable, so we'll exclude them. Feral cats aren't savable, so we'll exclude them. Pit bulls aren't savable, so we'll exclude them. So that's why we went to this 90% as the minimum floor of what we mean by getting to no-kill. But as I'm sure Abigail can tell you, and Cheryl can tell you, and Ellen can tell you, there might be months where that number is 88%. There might be months when the number is 97%. There might be numbers where it's near 100%. So it's kind of going to be variable based on what comes in and out of the shelter, but we think that floor is around 90%. Two, the rigorous implementation of the no-kill equation. It's going to take a combined effort on all of the elements of the no-kill equation, not just some of the elements. And it takes the rigorous implementation, not the implementation in name only. If you want to have 3 progressive shelter leadership, if you don't have a progressive shelter leader, it's going to be an obstacle to your success. It's going to be a tremendous obstacle. Now, there are shelter directors that I've come across who simply don't care. And they don't care, they're not for it or against it. They simply don't care. And so they'll say, go save as many as you want to save, I'm not going to help you. And that's fine. You probably can save a lot of animals in the community that way by just going to do it yourself. Unfortunately, in my experience, most of the shelter directors that I've talked to just say that's impossible and I'm not going to help you and it's dangerous and you shouldn't do that and you don't know what you're talking about. And so those are the ones you have to get past. And then last, codifying the basics. There's a Companion Animal Protection Act, which is model legislation that has been written by the No-Kill Advocacy Center that really sets very minimum bars for shelters. And those things are not going to get you to no-kill, but they're very minimum quality standards that we think that every state legislature and city council should pass. And they're very minimum. They're things like getting rid of the gas chamber, mandating rescue access, so that if a rescue group wants to save an animal, is ready, willing, and qualified to save an animal, you can't kill it. If an adopter is ready, willing, and able to save an animal and qualified, you can't kill the animal based on its breed. Very basic transparency requirements, so that all shelters report their intake and outcomes on a monthly basis. It's astonishing how much resistance there is to these basic requirements. In fact, in Texas, we proposed this legislation last year in the legislature, and the humane groups are the ones who got together and killed it. The Texas Humane Legislation Network rallied the troops against it, the Texas Animal Control Association, the Humane Society of the United States, the Houston Humane Society, and the Houston SPCA are the ones that killed the reform effort. Your audience, identifying your audience. And this is actually really important. Excuse me a second. Ellen has me speaking from 9 to 2 today, so it's her fault. I had a friend who called me, I think it was around 2008, actually I didn't know her. This woman called me at 2 o'clock in the morning and said, this horrible thing has happened at my shelter, and I don't know what to do about it. And she literally had no idea who she should talk to, who she should report it to, who was going to help her. I think most people think, I'm going to call PETA, and I'm going to call the ASPCA, and those groups actually don't favor shelter reform. So it's important to know who your audience is for the message that you have, and to target your message towards that audience. And I say that your primary audience should be the people that can actually affect the change the fastest, the ones that can actually do the things that you want them to do. And that is your shelter manager. If you have a shelter manager who is open to change, that should be your audience. Again, Cheryl is an amazing shelter director. She was completely open to considering alternatives to what was going on at the shelter. Sorry to use you so many times as an example, but we love you, Cheryl. So
I won't even have a lecture to do.
But if you find one that's open to change, you can actually cause amazing things to happen very quickly. It's my belief, and I know that not everybody believes this, but it's my belief that you should, before you do anything else other than preparing, you should go to your shelter director. You should say, I want to make you a hero. I want to make you the next leader in animal welfare in the country. And the way that we're going to do this is that we're going to implement the no-kill equation. You're going to be the hero. You're going to get all the credit. I'll do lots of the work for you, and we'll do this together. And there are shelter directors who will say, let's start. Let's do it. And then there are shelter directors like the one that I presented that speech to, who said, I have nothing to learn. And that will tell you a lot about what to do next. Also, your governing body for your shelter. So this gets a little tricky. If you have a animal shelter that is run by a municipality or by a city or county, then you're going to go to essentially the board of directors for that city or county, which is either a county commissioners or a city council. Those are the people that govern the shelter if your shelter is run by a municipality. If your shelter is run by a private organization, which is in the case in, I think, roughly half the communities, then the board of directors, there's going to be a private board of directors that is the governing body of the shelter. However, even adding a third wrinkle, if that shelter is a private humane society or SPCA that works for or is contracted to do the municipality's work, then you're going to have both the board of directors of the shelter and the county or city council to direct your communications to. And then there's the secondary audience, which is the public. Again, from this morning, what I talked about is the public is with you. The public wants to make this happen. The public does not want animals dead, and so they should be your audience because they can affect the primary audience, and so can the press. And I talked a little bit earlier about how the press can be against you, but the press can also be in your favor. And we're going to talk about how to make that happen. Man, I hope I remember what's down here. Pick your talking points and stick to them. Y'all might have to help me give this speech. I mean, some people have already seen it. Y'all have already seen it. So, John, Bergh, you guys just need to let me know if I missed something. So keep it simple. This is talking about your message. Okay, it's really, really important, and people in all industries, across industries, get this wrong. Everybody can do this better, including me, and anybody who's an expert can do this better than they're currently doing it. When you are speaking, You want to be as simple as possible. You want to craft your message as simple and short and concise as possible. You want to have an elevator speech. And what that is that by the time you get in an elevator and then get off an elevator, you want to have communicated everything you want somebody to know who happened to ride that elevator with you. That's how short and concise you should be able to turn your speech about your shelter into. So an example of that is this is an advertisement that we ran in Austin. Under the current shelter management, the city has killed more than 100,000 lost and homeless pets. Another example, this decade the city has killed one animal every 12 minutes. It's very simple, it's very concise, and it's very powerful. And as you can imagine, there's really no response to that. Like, how do you come back from the shelter has killed one animal every 12 minutes? I imagine somebody would respond with stuttering and uhs, because there's no way to simply combat that. And I actually encourage you, if you're in a community that has a kill shelter, to figure out exactly how many it is a year, figure out how many it is a day, figure out how many is a minute, and then communicate in that very powerful language of data. Data is really powerful. It speaks more strongly than general words or accusations do. If you say the shelter director doesn't care about animals, now we're going to have a fight about whether that person cares about animals. If you say the shelter has killed 100,000 animals in the last 6 years, we're no longer going to have a fight about personalities. And we're pretty much not even going to have a fight whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. Because everybody can agree that 100,000 animals in 6 years is bad. Now we immediately turn the topic to how do we fix it. And that's just a much better place than the shelter director doesn't care about animals. You want to target your message to your goals. So one of the things that we did early on at FixAustin is we fought the city's plan to abandon our shelter downtown, demolish it, and move it to the outskirts of town. We eventually lost that battle, although we did win a compromise, which was to keep open the current shelter as an adoption center. But this is one of our taglines. We said at the time, if the city moves the shelter, even more dogs and cats will die. It was that simple. That was our simple message. And I cannot tell you how many people ignored it and reported on something else. But I said it over and over and over again. Every time I was on a media interview, that's what I said. Every time it was in the paper, that's what I said. Every time I was talking to a television news person, that's what I said. I said that it didn't matter what question they asked, that's what I said. And about 3 to 4 months into the fight, they started repeating it like that. Animal advocates say that if the city moves the shelter, even more animals will die. Because they're just people, and they're just trying to can their story and move on to the next one. And I made the story simple for them. And that's when and that's actually the time that the momentum started shifting. And then pick the talking points and stick to them, and then repeat, repeat, repeat. Again, it took 6 months for me to get the media to report the story as I wanted it to be told. But because I said the same thing over and over and over and over again, then it worked. Keep your message simple and consistent, and focus on the unnecessary killing and the missing programs. Again, talk about things, not people. If it gets into a battle over whether a person is good or bad, that's a losing battle. If you get into a battle over whether or not animals should be dying or the programs that are missing, then that's a winning battle. I mean, we got to the point where we would literally go to our city council members and we'd say, we want 2 things. We want offsite adoptions and a foster program. And we tell them how many animals could be saved from offsite adoptions and a foster program. I think that we have the only city council in America where our city council knows what an offsite adoption is and a foster program is. Because we kept it that simple and we repeated it over and over and over again. Project professionalism, strength, and permanence. So there's actually a reason that I wear a coat and tie and a suit when I make these presentations, and it's not because I'm going to court today. It's because I want to be an example of what I'm asking everyone else to be when they engage in this arena. And one of the problems that we have as animal advocates is that people assume that we're crazy cat ladies. And sometimes they assume that correctly, and sometimes they assume that incorrectly. But the moment that they think that you're the animal person, there's a stigma to it, and they have preconceptions of what it is, how you're going to react to them, how you're going to communicate to them, they think of you as the PETA people. The people standing outside, throwing ketchup on people, screaming about, screaming bloody murder, calling everybody murderers. That's what they think you're going to be when you're the animal person. And so when you walk into a room in a coat and tie, and you're professional, and you communicate professionally in your press releases, and in your media statements, and in your press contacts, and in your website, and in your emails, everything as professional as possible, you begin to break that stigma, and you begin to have some level of trust. And I'm not saying that we did this right all the time. We didn't. We made mistakes. What I'm hoping for you guys is that you guys can skip the mistakes that we made. And so, every time we go, and I think it's in here later, but every time we go to the council, we go with papers, and we actually have bound materials that we leave with them. We flip through the papers and show them our points and the data that backs up each of our statements, and we leave that with them so that they can use it later. And in fact, one of the things that we gave to a council member when someone from the ASPCA went in and argued against us, the council member actually pulled out our fact sheet and said, "No, you're wrong about that," and actually pointed to the facts that we gave them. And so it's really powerful to leave information and to be professional as possible. Being the crazy cat lady meaning that you know where, even if you are the crazy cat lady, it's okay to be a crazy cat lady. It's not okay to present yourself as a crazy cat lady when you go to council meetings. Do not go to the council meetings after you just cleaned up a kennel. Bathe before you go to a council meeting. Really important to be, because these are the people that affect change. These are the people that affect change in any industry, are the people that look like the people that they're used to talking to, that act like the people that they're used to talking to. Again, 2005, they wouldn't even speak to us. Now they text me. We did this through relationships, through being professional, through sticking to our talking points. The other reason about being professional is that you look more legitimate. There have been studies that show that if you have a PowerPoint, people think that you're more prepared than if you don't have one, regardless of whether you're more prepared. If you have bound materials, you look more prepared than if you don't have bound materials, regardless of whether you're more prepared. People have a certain indicia of credibility, and they look to those things, and part of the things they look to is how you're dressed and what you leave behind and how clearly you communicate. And all of those things are ways to help animals. 2, use advocacy tools. So we're going to walk through a lot of the advocacy tools that you can use to help build your no-kill campaign. Website is absolutely required. It's still frustrating to me when people email me and they say, "We've been doing what you told us for 3 years and we're not getting anywhere." And I said, "Well, let me take a look at your website." "Oh, we don't have a website yet." Then you haven't been doing the things for 3 years that I told you to do. In this day and age, you have to have a website. It is not an option. You have to have a website because that's where everybody goes to look to check you out. It's not necessarily where everybody goes to look to get information about you, but they want to check you out. They want to see if you're legitimate. If you don't have a website, if you just have a Facebook page, you've already lost. You absolutely have to have a website. I think it helps in a blog because in a blog you can actually give them a different flair of information. Maybe you can be a little more critical in a blog than you can on your standard website. Maybe you can update it more frequently than your standard website. An email subscription list. And this has changed over the last 5 years, but my understanding is the latest information is that Facebook is phasing out a little bit as far as how to get people to do something. If you want to get somebody to do something, they're far more likely to do it if you send them an email than if you post it on Facebook. However, you can't send them an email every day. You can post something on Facebook every day. If you send them an email every day, they're going to start deleting the moment they see your email and they won't even open it. And your open rate will be very, very low. So you have to be careful. You can't give them too much information. You can't give them too little information. I try to not email our subscription list very often at all. And when I do, there's always an ask. You have wasted an email if there's not an ask at the end. Every time you email the people who are supporting you, you need to ask them to take some kind of action. Facebook is also great because there are some people that are going to want to be more active, that's fine, and those people are going to support you on Facebook, and that's great. Facebook's also good because people all over the country will like your page, which will make you look more legitimate and more credible than you might otherwise be. An Examiner is an online newspaper that some people are using. I don't personally use it, but I know people who have used it very well. It's a user submission online newspaper. So you can write an article and it looks like it's in a newspaper, but you just wrote it and you posted it yourself. And again, it kind of gives this air of credibility to something that might not otherwise be. I have a couple of websites that I think are pretty good that I included in here. This is King County Animal Care and Control Exposed. Now they based their website off of our website, but it's better than ours. And I know that there are ones that are way better than these now, but I just at the time used these. You can see just the basics. I think there's a clicker. There we go. So you can see the basics here, homepage, about us, so the person can give a description of what's going on. News, which keeps people up to date on what's happening. There's a blog, frequently asked questions. This is the same thing we do on ours. Learn more, that's a way to get people to sign up. They added cruelty, which we don't have, it's not part of our mission. How you can help, so that I think this is actually really important. Most people spend about, I think on average, something between 30 and 45 seconds on a web page. That's all they're going to give you. They're going to give you less than a minute for your web page. If they visit your web page, you've already won, but if you don't communicate something to them in less than a minute, you've lost them. And so I think everybody should have a how you help page, and it should be very, very simple. It should say, send this message to City Council, and it should have a link to emailing City Council all in one email address. Don't make them type in email addresses. Here it is, here's how you send an email to all of them. It should say, send us a donation, and it should say, share this message with your friends. Something very, very simple that you can get them to do in 5 minutes, or else you've lost them. And contact us so that they can do so. Justice for Bella is another no-kill advocacy organization. This one's in North Carolina. The reason I use this one is because it was free, and they did it, I think, in a day. Anybody can do this. This is not hard stuff. You can see the same type of stuff across the top. About us, blog, contact us, how you can help. Again, these are form things. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. I like this one because I think they use a really good use of video. This advocacy group got started because a friend of mine now, his name's Jeff, he went to dinner with his daughter, and when he got home, his 2 pit bulls had gotten out somehow of his fenced in backyard. And this man, this deputy sheriff, they went to pick them up, because they were called, and the first dog, Jackson, who's not in the picture, ran straight up to him and he put him in the truck. And Bella, who's pictured here, would not immediately come to him. You know, everybody knows this. There are 2 types of dogs. There are squiggly butt dogs and then there are runners. And the squiggly butt dogs come straight up to any human being that they see, and then the runners run. And Bella's a runner. She didn't run straight up to him. Not vicious, she didn't bark at anybody, but she didn't immediately come up to him, so he shot her and killed her on the spot because he said he didn't have time to deal with it. But that led Jeff to create this website and create a no-kill advocacy group. And they went from a shelter that literally had no adoption program and 90% kill rate to one that's saving about 50% now, which is still not no-kill, but pretty amazing. That one man's story and the pain that happened to him, the horrible incident that happened to him, led to saving thousands of lives since then. In addition to the things that you can do, you also want to get the media to help you. One thing that you can do is create a media list. I think everybody should do this. It's really not that hard, but again, it's one of those basic things that you should do. Figure out what all of the email addresses is to submit things to your local media. All of your print media, all of your magazine, newspapers, and all your television stations and radio stations, they all have a submission email. It's usually like info@kxan.com. You can go to the websites. Every single one of them wants news stories. Every single one of them, you know, they're lazy, they need help with doing their jobs, and this is the way that you can help them. They want this stuff. It's not stuff, they're asking for it. I know Michael used to be in the media, so he'd probably be mad at me for saying I'm lazy, but they want this stuff. They want you to help them get with their next story. And you can do so by creating a media list. In addition to those info websites, or info email addresses, you also want to include the email address of any person in the media that's done a story that related to animals. This could be a weatherman, it could be a sports person, it could be the anchor who doesn't do the stories themselves but happens to mention spay and neuter your dog at the end of every show. Anybody who has expressed the least bit of attention and interest in animals, you want to include on that media list. You want to develop real relationships with media. Don't call them lazy in front of them. Actually develop real relationships with them. If I had a chalkboard and had written down what I wanted you to get from this, if you didn't listen to anything else, it would have been two things. One, relationships are winning. Relationships are the key to winning. And two, we'll get to two in a minute. But one is relationships are everything. Okay? Relationships are everything. They're everything in winning. You get to win by having relationships with people that can get you the things that you want. And they will want to help you if you have relationships with them, and they don't want to help you if they don't have relationships with them. So develop real relationships. Email, introduce yourself to me. If you see someone who does a story on media, introduce yourself to them. Talk to them. Offer to have lunch with them, or to have coffee with them, or to help get them more information. You don't have to be the source of information. You can be the person that they call when they need a story. Again, talking about the importance of relationships, we had a member of the news media in Austin, a local television station, and she would blast no kill every time she had a story. Just rip us apart, talking about how mean we were and all that stuff. And then she and I were talking one day, and we discovered that we had a mutual friend, a very close mutual friend in Washington, D.C. From that moment on, her reporting completely switched. Because she didn't want to blast somebody that she had a mutual friend with. That would be terrible. Relationships are everything. There was an editor of a local newspaper. The editorial board of the Statesman used to say horrible things about us. And then one of the editors we invited to walk the list with us and to pick the animals who were going to be saved that day. From that moment on, the editorial board's viewpoints on no kill changed. Real relationships are the key to success, and they're the key to success in the media. We talked a little bit about press releases earlier. I think your press releases need to look really, really professional. They don't need to look like just anybody threw them together. You need to have a logo on the top. A logo is really important because it, again, gives you an indicia of professionalism. It makes you look resilient. It makes you look permanent. It makes you look like you're the real deal. And so you put that on everything that you brand. You put your logo on it. You want attention-grabbing language, but not inflammatory. You need to write it like it's a real news story. Your press release, I kid you not, they will sometimes run it as their own. The exact language that you wrote, they will run it as their own sometimes. Or sometimes they'll say, a print media will say, we got this press release from FixAustin, and they will run the whole thing. They will copy and paste the whole thing. And it's because you made it look professional, you made it look like a news story. Include quotes, again, just like a news story. Proofread it. You have to be professional. You have to make it look like you're legitimate. Have a friend proofread anything before it goes out. And always be honest. You can only lose your credibility once, and then it's gone. If you lose your credibility with one reporter, it's gone. It will take you years to get it back. So because it's a marathon and not a sprint, you want to make sure that you maintain your relationships with these people. Always be credible to a fault. I mean, if you have to admit that that someone is doing something good, admit it. If you have to admit that the shelter's adoption program is good, admit it. That's fine. That's how you keep your credibility. And you can buy media too. Advertising can be very effective to spread your message, but also to send a message. So I know that in Portland they had an awesome advertisement that I saw. Full page ad. Barbara, did you do that?
Yeah.
It was beautiful.
Based on what you taught.
Okay, so I get credit for that. Not a spittoon today. But so here's the thing that we've learned with advertisements. Always buy a full page ad. Don't buy a little ad like this big. It doesn't do anything. It makes you look weak. So save your money and always buy a full page ad. They're not as expensive as you might think, especially if you need to ask for the nonprofit rate and you need to ask for the political rate, because those two can be different. In some newspapers, one's cheaper than the other, so ask for both. In our local Chronicle, which is the newspaper that hates us, we still advertise it. We think it's kind of funny, and I'm sure they think it's kind of funny too. We pay them to write horrible stories about us, but that's the way we get back at their horrible stories. There might be an edition where we know a horrible story is coming, we'll buy an ad in that edition. So we've got a full page ad to their little story like this big with one nasty quote about us. And so, but always buy the full page ad because that's what makes you look powerful. And you can bargain with them about, you can argue with, you can bargain about the price. You can try to pay in advance. You can try to get a payment plan. Our local, so we're a city of 1 million people. Our local weekly magazine, and I think it's about $1,000 for a full page ad. Sometimes $1,200. It's more if you do black. It's less if you do black and white. More if you do color. But you can get the money if you get the right people together. And that's in a city of 1 million. If you have a city with fewer, your weekly magazine is going to be weekly advertisements are going to be way cheaper than that. We did buy one ad in the Statesman, which is our daily main newspaper, and that was a lot more expensive, but we still got it at a discount rate. And one of the ways you can do that is you can call them ahead of time, develop a relationship with their media group, with their advertising group. And we said, if anybody ever pulls an ad at the last minute, we want it, and we'll do it at this price. And so, and this happens all the time in newspapers, that they'll have like a Macy's sale, and then Macy's will decide they don't want the sale, and they'll have a blank page, and now they gotta fix it. Now they gotta fill it. And you can tell them, if that ever happens, we want to run the ad, and we'll pay this amount for it. And we did that. And it was astonishing how successful that one ad buy was, because in addition to the fact that it scared the bejesus out of the opposition, who called the newspaper to ask how much we paid for it, one of the local television stations did a news story on how the animal advocates had bought a full page ad in the local paper. So it sent a message and it spread the message. But again, always do the full page. Here's an example of a press release. I use this one because it was the most successful press release I have ever written. And the story kind of sold itself, but either way, I'm going to take credit for it. So there's our logo on the top. You want to have contacts. And there's an example of this, by the way, in the PDF, so you'll have this. But contacts, so you want to have the name of the person who they can contact, the organization, and then a phone number for them. If you have multiple, that's great. Make it look like, this is standard press release format, date, breaking for immediate release. Then you want to, again, make it look, this is not the whole thing, obviously, it went on for several paragraphs, but make it look like a news story. Here's the headline, Thieves Strike, and it's written just like a news story. Thieves Strike, Austin nonprofit, take money donations used to rescue homeless dogs and cats. And then I like to have a subhead that adds a little more information, and then I start, and again, it looks like a news story. The location in capital letters, the date, and then it's written just like a news story. Striking a blow to Austin's efforts to become no community, thieves grabbed and ran off with several $100s of much-needed donations. The local nonprofit Austin Pets Alive, whose mission is to save lives by rescuing animals from town like Animal Center. Prior to the thefts, the group had saved nearly 2,000 animals in the last 12 months. Make it look like a news story. This was the most successful news release I have ever written. I mean, they were all over it. And in fact, it was so good that I think we got like 5 to 10 times as many donations donated to us to make up for the stolen donations. Several of the television news stories did it, the news stations did a story on it, and the Statesman did a news story on it. And someone called the Statesman and said, I want to replace every single dollar that they think they might have lost. Here is an example of a full-page ad that we ran in 508 BC. The Greeks invented a system that can dramatically reduce the killing of Austin's lost and homeless pets, democracy. And again, remember I talked about always the ask, don't ever waste a communication without asking somebody to do something about it. So try it out, show up at City Hall, be the voice for Austin's homeless pets, tell the City Council not to move the animal shelter, that's what we're fighting about at the time. And then we have the City Council's names, phone numbers, and email addresses, and we ask people to contact them. we kind of did a theme for a while. In the 1980s, Al Gore invented a device that can dramatically reduce the amount of lost and homeless pets, the internet. And again, see, we use our logo again, and it's kind of cute, right? I mean, it's kind of cute, it's kind of funny. Log on, visit FixAustin.org, send an email to the Austin City Council asking them not to relocate. Again, same thing. This is called spot color because it's got one color. It's a black and white ad with spot color. It's not a color ad. So there's a little more than a black and white, but a lot less than color. So here's the spot color, which is the red. And again, make the ask and tell them what to do. I would argue, and I wrote this ad so I can criticize myself, I would argue this is still too much content. The mistake that most people make when they buy political ads is the whole thing will be content and no one will read it. No one will even notice it. So use as little content as possible, make it cute, make it clever if you can, and make your ask. Maybe I should have gotten rid of the stuff in the middle and just said, bam, here's our issue, here's our cuteness, here's what grabbed your attention, here's what we're going to do. So next, get involved with politics. This is probably the most important thing that you can do as an animal advocate in your community. Remember I talked about the key lesson, which was relationships? It's not just relationships with the press, it's not just relationships with the other stakeholders, it's also relationships with decision makers. And that is the county council or your city council problem with most communities. You want to establish real relationships with them. You want to get to know them as people, and you want them to get to know you as people. I like to tell people, and they still get mad at me when I tell them this. Michael doesn't, he agrees. I said that if the city council member sees you in the grocery store and doesn't stop to say hi, then you're not winning. Because they don't know you well enough to have a real relationship. That's the level of relationships you need to have with them. They need to know who you are. They need they don't have to like you. They have to respect you enough to actually stop and say hello to you when they see you on the street. And that's when you know you're getting somewhere, because that's when you have a real relationship with them. You want to lobby and educate the decision makers, be prepared. I talked about the materials, and I also talked about making the ask. It's a theme here. Don't waste your time by meeting with a council member and then not asking for something. I can't tell you, and this again, these are mistakes that we've made. I'm not trying to tell you that we're perfect. These are mistakes we've made that we want other people to get past. I can't tell you how many meetings we came out of thinking, man, that was awesome. We just got everything we wanted. And then we thought to ourselves, what did we get? 20 minutes with a council member is all we got because we didn't ask for anything at the end. And then as we kind of got better at this and got better relationships, we would always ask something, and sometimes it would be a little uncomfortable, and sometimes it wasn't. Sometimes it was easy, and sometimes it was hard. Sometimes they said no, and sometimes they said yes. But we never would have gotten anywhere had we not asked them to take specific, concrete action. So we would say, would you commit to, on the next agenda, the next city council agenda, putting off-site adoptions on the next city council agenda? That's the type of ask you want to ask for them. Would you commit to calling for the resignation of the city of the shelter manager? Will you commit to me? And will you allow me to, in the next 2 weeks, announce that you've made that commitment? That's something they hate. Will you allow me to announce that you've made that commitment? And if they won't allow you to announce it, they don't really mean it. But if they'll allow you to make that announcement, that means they're thinking it. Participate in elections. And we're going to do this in Austin, we're actually prepping for it now. Our city council elections are coming up in May. And so what we do is we send questionnaires to all of our councilmen, all of the major candidates to the city council. We send questionnaires ahead of time on animal welfare questions. These are not open, objective questions. We are not trying to see what their feelings are on animals. What we're trying to do is influence their feelings on animals. So the questions are along the lines of the following. In cities that have achieved no-kill, approximately 25% of the animals or more have been adopted out from off-site adoptions. Will you commit to requiring off-site adoptions at the main shelter next year? Those are the type of questions that we have. They give them some information, they make it, and they ask for a commitment. Some are a little more open-ended than that, but that's the kind of question we ask. We have an Animal Advisory Commission, which is a citizen commission. Most large cities in Texas have it. Citizen Commission on Animal Welfare, which is an advisory commission in name only, but it's an advisory only. But we will ask, what kind of person are you looking for to fill that animal advisory commission seat? What qualities are you looking for? What experience are you looking for? What viewpoint do you want them to have? We will ask those questions. We will educate them on issues that we know that they're hearing about. One of the things that people will talk about all the time, people who don't know what they're talking about, but people who, they will say we need mandatory spay neuter. If we just mandated that people spay neuter their animals, then we could be no-kill. Well, that's false. We know it because we actually have hundreds of cities in the country that have mandated spay neuter, and it doesn't work. None of them are no-kill. And now we have several dozen no-kill cities, none of whom have mandatory spay neuter. So it's not true, but that's what they're hearing. That's what kind of comes up from the people. And so we educate them on mandatory spay neuter. We give them a flyer that tells them why mandatory spay neuter doesn't work. We talk about the cities in which this failed, such as Los Angeles, where the intake and killing went up 30% after they passed mandatory spay neuter. And we'll say, so here are the statistics on mandatory spay neuter. It's never worked in the community. It often leads to increased intake and killing. What's your position on mandatory spay neuter? They know what we want their answer to be, and some of them will say what we think it should be, and then we hold them to it, because we'll have it written down later. You promised when you were running for office that you would vote against mandatory spay neuter. City Council Animal Welfare School Report. So what we do after we have, and this year actually, last year we started, this year we're going to do it again. We're going to do a public forum where we invite all the City Council candidates to answer questions publicly about no-kill issues. I don't think you can probably do this your first year. You can only do it when you know you can fill a room. We can fill a room now, so we can have that. It's kind of an aside, but my belief is that you shouldn't ever do a march or a big public meeting unless you know you can fill it. Because if you have a march and 3 people show up with signs, it's not impressive. If you have a march and 150 people show up with signs, that's cool. You know, Lovable has huge, massive marches, which is awesome, and that gets attention. But if you have a march and 3 people show up, it's not impressive. So when we have these public meetings now, public forums, where 100, 150 people will show up and ask questions, and we will ask the candidates questions about animal welfare. We then buy a full-page ad in the newspaper rating the candidates on their opinions on animal welfare. Now, we can do this as FixAustin because we're not a 501c3. A 501c3 cannot do this, so you have to do it outside of a 501c3. But we then rank the candidates and we do a scorecard. We give them 5 out of 5 paws if they're really great, 3 out of 3 out of 5 if they're okay, 1 paw if they're terrible. And actually, it's surprising that the candidates really care what their rating is. They do not want to get a bad animal welfare scorecard rating. And again, we're talking about over the course of a couple of years. We went from them not meeting with us to now them being worried how we're going to rate them in our full-page advertisements. We then email, web, and blog about the ratings, and it goes all over the city because emails get forwarded like crazy. And then we do a press release, and we'll even do a press event with the candidates that got a really good rating, and then the press will cover that. So you're getting press over and over and over again from the same topic. So here's one of the ones we did. Again, I think the mistake here is too much content, but I'm just giving you an example. There is our logo at the top. You've seen it over and over again. Here's what we did. We ranked the candidates, 5 paws for those candidates, 3.5 for this candidate, 2 for this candidate. And then we have a little blurb at the bottom about who we are. This again is called spot color because you see one color. Full page ad, again, the whole thing. We didn't do a tiny ad. And then we describe the candidates. A couple of things to note here. All of these candidates at the top, they knocked our socks off. They were great. They completely committed to no-kill, so we gave them really good scores. This is the mayor in the middle now, Lee Levinger. At the time, he hadn't really helped us at all. A little bit. He had helped a little bit, but he was going to win. And so was General Cole, and we knew that. And it doesn't do you any good to trash somebody who's going to win. So that's why we were more moderate in their ratings of them than we might otherwise have been had they had a legitimate contender going against them. You have to be smart. It's not just about your honest beliefs on how good they are. You have to also understand that you have to have relationships with these people. And Lee Levinger actually made a ran into a friend of mine who he had not known was a friend of mine. He said, I can't believe I got 3.5 paws. He was so excited because he was worried that he was going to get fewer paws than that. What are the lessons here? Democracy is accessible. It's there for you to grab it. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. It's already there for you. The advocacy tools are at your disposal, and relationships are everything. Now I'm going to talk about predictable and recurring challenges, because we've already talked about how to build the campaign. So one of the problems that you will face is the status quo. The status quo is very powerful, and it is generally going to be against you. The status quo is what it is now. You know, the inertia, the people in place, the people in power now. And their job is to protect themselves and to consolidate power. And they will systematically, predictably do the following things. They will deny that a problem exists. They will attack you as being uninformed, naive, or an activist. They will redirect criticism by blaming the public rather than themselves. They will use scare tactics like, well, there are things worse than death, as if you're trying to harm animals somehow. They will claim credit for everything that you do right, and they will deflect blame for everything that they do wrong. They will falsely claim that they are already doing all of the things that you're asking them to do. And please note that the status quo expects you to give up and go away, because that's what everybody else does. What happens predictably over and over again on any issue across the social hemisphere is that people will get riled up about an issue, and they'll go talk to the city council, and they'll talk at an event or talk at a city council meeting, and they'll pound their fists on the table, and they will be just shocked that the city council didn't even look twice at them. And they will think, well, the system's broken, and it just doesn't work. I give up. People can't change the system. Well, that's what the system expects you to do, and so it's built to convince you to give up, because they don't want to change. They're doing their jobs every day, and then they want to go home with their family. These are human beings. They don't want you to make their lives harder. Whether they love animals or hate animals or don't care about animals, they just want to go home at the end of the day and spend time with their family. And you're trying to rock the boat. You're trying to change everything, and they expect you to go away. And the system is built to incentivize you to go away, to get you to throw up your hands and think, well, it just can't be done. And you've got to get past that initial step. You've got to get past that wall to accomplish anything. So who are in the status quo? The public officials, current shelter management, the ASPCA, the PETA, and HSUS have all of those no-kill in Austin and elsewhere. The uninformed press, we talked about that this morning. And in Austin, at least, it was the major current animal welfare players at the time. These are the people that not necessarily, but likely are going to be against you in this endeavor. Who is with you? The No-Kill Advocacy Center is. Nathan Winograd, we talked about him earlier. We're with you. American Pets Alive is now, we're trying to spread our Austin Pets Alive message all over the country in the form of American Pets Alive, and we are with you, and you can use us and rely on us. The public is with you, they just don't know it yet because you haven't led and you haven't asked them to follow you, but when you do, they're with you. The sympathetic and informed press, so we talked about relationships. Well, when you get those relationships and you inform them and you help them and you shape them, then they're going to be with you and then they're allies. And the moment they switch, they probably won't ever switch back. They'll be in your favor completely. And animal lovers all over the country, like you guys, I'm amazed at how many different cities and states are represented, even in this small 1/3 of the group. There are people all over the country that want to make this happen. And it's time for us to band together and realize that we are together. And believe me, there are way more of us than there are of them. They just have the power now, and we've got to get the power. The theme of last year's No-Kill conference in Washington, D.C. was fight the power, and I actually think it should have been be the power. It's your job to take over and be the power and be the influencer, or the decider, as George Bush would say. So what are the lessons here? This will be a battle. It will likely take time. It's a marathon, not a sprint. And the status quo is against you, but the system is built to give you the power to change everything. Our founding fathers created a system to make change difficult. They did it on purpose. They called small groups factions. This is in the Federalist Papers. They called small groups factions. And they wanted factions to not be able to change things. They wanted to make it very difficult for small groups to affect policy change. But they wanted to make it possible for you to do so. Difficult, but possible. And so that's what you're up against. And you have to use all of the advocacy tools that I've been talking about to go from difficult to possible. And that's how you flip the switch, is you engage in the democratic process. So I know there are a lot of these, but I'm going to flip through them as quickly as I can. So how to respond to status quo denials and attacks. Always take the high road. Remember I talked about it's a marathon, not a sprint. I did not always do this right. I absolutely did not. And one of the mistakes I made, I should have talked about it earlier with the press. The reason I showed up on the cover with an angry wolf head is because I got into, essentially a screaming match over email with a reporter. And from that day on, that newspaper, everything they write is against no-kill. Whether it's me or someone else involved in no-kill, or Ellen, or Austin Pets Alive, or American Pets Alive, everything they write is against it. And I think, probably taking too much of the blame, but it's largely because of a bad interaction that I had with the reporter. And so you can't have that. Don't have a bad interaction with the reporter ever, because they'll always be against you. Take the high road, stay in the game, and outlast them. Expect to be attacked. Knowing it will happen will make it easier for you. Justice Rebel is a good example. When I told them this, they were like, that's not going to happen. And then they got attacked ruthlessly. And they told me, I'm so glad that you told us that was going to happen, because it didn't hurt so much. It's systemic. It's not about you. It's the system's response to a request to change. It's not personal. They're going to attack anybody who wants the system to change. And so you just have to understand that they are playing their role when they attack you, and you are playing your role when you're asking for change. And that's just part of how it's going to be. It is not personal. It feels personal, believe me. I didn't like waking up with a wolf's head on the cover of the newspaper, but in a way it's kind of, a compliment. Not everybody wakes up with a wolf head on the cover of the newspaper. Fight back with data, logic, and righteous indignation. Remember, give them precise information. Don't make it personal. Don't make it about someone who cares about an animal or doesn't. Give them specific, precise information. No-kill is inevitable, and you have to act like it is, because they have to believe that you're not going away. This is going to happen in our community. We are going to make it happen. And if you're not with us, then you're not with us. That's fine, but this is going to happen. Project strength, professionalism, and resiliency, and then you need to outwork them, wear them down, and drive them out. I'll go through these as quick as I can, but there are things that they're going to say. Again, it's systemic. You're going to hear the same things. Every community, the same thing happens. These are like personality types, archetypes of people. It's like they're programmed. And then all you have to do is press the play button, and they're all going to say the same thing. And so you need to be prepared to respond. They say it's all about pet overpopulation. That's why we're killing. And if people would just stay near their animals, then we wouldn't be killing. You say that's not correct. According to a recent study by Maddie's Fund and the Humane Society of the United States, there are far more homes adopting an animal every year than there are animals entering animal shelters. In fact, 4 times as many animals are adopted in America every year than there are entering shelters. 7 times as many animals are adopted every year as there are animals being killed in shelters. The math is actually in our favor, not on overpopulation's favor. That doesn't mean that there aren't a lot of animals coming into the shelter. Of course there are. What it does mean is that there are far more people adopting or acquiring animals in the community than there are animals coming to the shelter, which means that the number of animals leaving alive is a product of market share, not overpopulation. So when an animal shelter increases its market share of that market for animals, that's when lives are saved. And in addition to that, the No-Kill Advocacy Center has done a study which comes to the same conclusion. The American Medical Association has numbers that come to the same conclusion. We found that in Austin, about 70,000 people acquire a new pet every year. We had 14,000 dying. We knew at that moment we could make it happen. And there's no peer-reviewed study anywhere that supports overpopulation. I actually spent about a month looking for evidence of overpopulation, because everybody assumes that it's true, but they don't actually say what it means. They just say, well, we have lots of animals dying. Okay, so what does it mean? What does overpopulation mean? There's not even a set definition. No one knows for sure what it is. They just assume that it's true. HSU has on its website that evidence of overpopulation is animals dying. Well, that doesn't make any sense, because if that's the case, then Austin was overpopulated in 2007, but not in 2011. That means that Reno was overpopulated in 2006, but not 2007. That means that Williamson County was overpopulated right before Cheryl got there, but not right after. That doesn't make any sense. So overpopulation can't be measured by how many animals are dying. It has to be something else. No one's come up with anything to explain it. They're going to say it's always the irresponsible public's fault. Again, they like to blame the public, and people love it. People buy into it. But blaming the public is an excuse, not a strategy. It doesn't help. It doesn't get you out of the problem. It might identify a cause, but it doesn't identify a solution. And the public may be responsible for some of the animals entering the shelter, but they're not responsible for what happens when the animals get to the shelter. At that point, our community is responsible because they're now in our care. We are stewards of them, and we get to decide what happens to them after they get there. And there's an irresponsible public. To the extent that the public is the cause of this problem, the public was just as irresponsible before Austin went no-kill as after. The public didn't change. The public didn't change in Reno. The public didn't change in Ithaca. And Ithaca went no-kill in an afternoon. They just decided we're not going to kill anymore. The public didn't change in an afternoon. The public stayed the same the whole time. So the public is not a barrier to no-kill. They'll say you can't adopt your way out of the killing. And spay, neuter, education, mandatories, or laws are the only way, but that has never worked. In addition to that, you need to tell them while reducing intake is part of the solution, you have to increase live outcomes too. I've tried, I know that it's so against conventionalism that it's hard to swallow, but you actually can't save a life by spay, neuter. I realized this the other day. It sounds crazy, but you cannot save a life by spay, neuter. You can only prevent a life by spay, neuter. You can only actually save a life that's already been born. And spay neuter does nothing for them. The animal's already been born. The only way you can save it is by getting it out of the shelter alive. And that's why we have to focus on that side of it too. They'll say no-kill is too expensive, but according to the Animal-Advocacy Center, who did a study on this, there's no correlation between the amount of money the shelter spends and whether or not it's no-kill. Of course, money makes it easier to be no-kill. That's obvious. Of course, things cost money. That's obvious. But there are shelters with great big budgets that aren't no-kill. There are shelters with tiny budgets that are. It's about the programs and policies, not the money. They'll say no-kill can't work in our community, and I say flip that on them. And I say, how dare you say that our people are worse? How dare you blame our community? How dare you say that the people of Austin are better than the people of our community? If other people can, Reno, Nevada can do it, we can too. How dare you blame us? How dare you say that it's about us and not about the animals? In addition to that, programs have worked in communities all over the country. Rich, poor, southern, northern, rural, urban. Every type of community there is has an example of a no-kill community. They'll say, how could you? Shelter employees are animal lovers and no one wants to kill animals. And I say just get off of that conversation. It doesn't help. There might be, PETA certainly enjoys killing animals, it seems, but for the most part, it doesn't help to have that conversation. Just get to, okay, we're not talking about whether anybody enjoys it. We're not talking about the blame game. We're talking about solutions. Let's talk about solutions. How do we get out of the current box that we're in? And we get out of it by programs and policies. Communicate. The only exception that I have to that is when there's a shelter director who's doing bad things but who has a lot of credibility in the community. Then I say you got to do death by 1,000 cuts. So every single time something bad happens, you report it. The first 300 times you report it, everybody will ignore you. But maybe by the 600th or 700th time, they'll start believing that, okay, maybe something bad is actually happening over there. You need to become a power player. Again, this is kind of reviewing a little bit, but spend money, donate to campaigns, buy fake full-page ads. We actually, not in our capacity as FixAustin, but in our capacity as individuals, because remember, your organization is different from who you are as an individual. As an individual, you can host a fundraiser for a city council candidate. Do so. Get involved at that kind of level with campaigns. Stick around. It's those who don't quit who win. The system is built to convince you to quit, to convince you to give up, because that's what everybody else does, and that's the easiest way to not deal with the problem. Communicate clear messaging. If you are for the animals, then you are for no-kill. I try to be as clear as that. If you are for the animals, you're for no-kill. If you are against no-kill, then you're against the animals. Those who defend the status quo, I kind of did this in another community because everybody was bashing the advocates. And so I wrote a blog post about those who defend the status quo are taking the side of killing. Being very, very precise in your language and very, very concise. what to expect when you're wedding. And this was, it took a long time in Austin. It took several years. But this is what started to happen. So the city of Austin, who was still fighting us just a few years ago, decided that what they were going to do is they were going to help host this giant public forum. And they knew, because they had allies telling them, don't do any of the things that the no-kill advocates are saying. They thought they could just pack it with people who were going to oppose us. And that it would be this kind of slugfest and that nothing would happen. Because the slugfest favors the inertia. It favors the status quo. What happened is that the people that were against no-kill didn't have the guts to show up, even after the city called the giant open forum. And they actually called each other, and they communicated, no one show up. So this giant open forum that was publicized, whose sole purpose was to fight no-kill by the city, 150 people showed up. And at the end of the meeting, they took a vote, and the vote was 150 to 0 in favor of no-kill. That's when you know you're winning, is when the other side will no longer debate you. They will no longer have a public argument. Of course, they're still lobbying behind the scenes. They still do it today. But they do not have the guts to communicate in public against what we're asking for. The regressive shelter director moves on or is reassigned. Cats and dogs start coming out of shelter alive rather than in body bags. And the movement becomes far bigger than you are. In fact, it'll pass you by. And this is among the most exciting things, is that although Ellen, and Austin Pets Alive will give me, I think, too much credit for this in Austin, the truth of the matter is, if you walked up to the average person in Austin, they would have no idea who I am. They would have never heard of FixAustin.org. We did not infiltrate the market like Austin Pets Alive did, and we would get 0 credit, and that's fine, because it's not about us. It's about this movement, and this movement is like a giant tidal wave at this point. It's not this one little organization that started with 3 lawyers and a teacher and a couple of engineers in 2005. We're irrelevant. The movement is so much bigger than we are, and that's what's going to keep no-kill alive in Austin, not anything that we did. You'll get 0 credit for achieving no-kill success. In fact, they'll probably still blame you and put a picture of you with a wolf's head on the cover of the local newspaper, but that's fine, because success is what you're going for. This is my parting advice. I love this quote from Dr. Bergh. It said, we must combine the toughness of the serpent and the softness of the dove, a tough mind and a tender heart. And I think for us, that's exactly what we have to have. We have to be tough, we have to have thick skin, but we also have to recognize that at the end of the day, the purpose of what we are doing is saving lives, and frankly, that's all about love. Love for every being that comes into that shelter, every animal that we take the stewardship of. And I know, Cheryl's in the room, I know how much she cares about the animals that go into her shelter. She told me one day, and I'll never forget this, we were talking about the issue of whether or not you should spay late-term moms. And it's not a settled issue, even among the most progressive no-kill leaders. And I personally don't think that we should, because the late-term spay, if anybody knows, is they actually cut the babies out who are alive, and then they kill them, and then they don't count that as a death, because they count it as a spay instead of a kill. And I was talking to Cheryl one late night, probably 9 o'clock, she was still at her shelter, and she said, there are a lot of things that I have to account for when I meet my maker, but this is not one of them. And I'll never forget it. It still gives me chills thinking about that. And at the end of the day, that's what it's about. It's about love for every being. It's about having that tender heart at the same time as having a tough mind. And so with that, I'll open it up to questions.